What is up, everybody? I'm NoLucksGiven here with your afternoon snap, and today I'm here to talk about a mistake. Yesterday, I unlocked Cull Obsidian and Skaar in Marvel Snap, and the reason that that was a mistake is because I have not been able to put the game down since then. I'm having so much fun playing this deck, so warning. If you are thinking about purchasing Skaar and Cull Obsidian so that you can play this deck too, you might not be able to do anything else because it's really fun, it's really powerful. I've been able to use this to climb from the top 800 players all the way into the top 400 players on the global post-infinite leaderboard. So having a lot of success with this list, it's really strong and for good reason. So with this video, I'm gonna take a look at my favorite games just from today. I unlocked Skaar today, and all of these games are from one day of just playing casually while I'm doing other things, living my life kind of, but not really, because I'm just obsessed with this deck and I've been having so much fun playing with it. I thought this game would be a fun one to kick this video off with because I've got Cull Obsidian and Skaar both in this center location from Lockjaw. Unfortunately, however, my opponent's Magneto is going to fill that center location for me and mean that I'm losing it thanks to my opponent's big Blob. However, what got me into this situation can get me out. I can play my own Magneto and take Jubilee out of that center location for my opponent and actually swing it back in my favor. And I feel confident enough here that I think I can snap because I don't think my opponent will retreat in this scenario either. One thing I was thinking, like, the only good play that they could maybe have would be like Blade plus Hela if they are potentially a discard deck, or maybe Giganto into Daily Bugle. But either way, I think that Magneto is going to be able to beat my opponent, and I'm basing that off the fact that I stole their Infinite from Daily Bugle. Turns out Magneto is going to be able to take it. That first game I thought was just like a good one to open the video off on, though this might not be my favorite game of this video, but it's a close second. This game is really fun, and it kicks off, so I'm playing Reality Stone into Atlantis, specifically because I want to increase the variance in the game. And this is something that I've kind of talked about before, but I like using Reality Stone on already revealed locations if I don't feel like I'm in like a super dominating position. And without Lockjaw, I think that it's worth like trying to spin the wheel here and see what happens, and I get rewarded with a lot of variance here. Rickety Bridge coming out, and I'm up against a destroy deck. Maybe this wasn't the best idea. However, the fact that my opponent already has used Bucky Barnes now means that they won't be able to use it on the final turn to just totally flip the game in their favor. However, I do think that there are still some ways out of this. And if you've been playing Blob Thanos, you might recognize some of the tools that a Blob Thanos deck has in this situation. It's basically one card though. It's Caiera, and it's hoping to draw Caiera with all of my might here. So I'm gonna move Mind Stone over into Rickety Bridge just to blow some stuff up, and then I'm gonna hope against all hope that I find Caiera, and I do. And I did think that it was worth staying in it in this situation and just hoping that Caiera comes up. From here, I actually do kind of like getting Vibranium because that can allow me to make a really big blob. One thing that I was not thinking about initially though as well, Vibranium could also be a key way for my opponent to win in Rickety Bridge, because whoever has more Vibranium is going to be good other than Wolverine. Wolverine's going to bounce around a bunch until it lands in the Vibranium mines, and then my opponent can destroy it and send it out of there. So there's a lot of funky stuff going on this game. I'm also playing Caiera on a wave turn, which is not ideal, but it works out really nicely with the curve because I can also throw down this Time Stone, and I did order them specifically in this way so that way I could draw some Vibranium, but now on turn 5 I'll be able to play Blob, and then on turn 6 I will be able to play Skaar plus Power Stone plus Vibranium. So all of that still seems really, really good to me, despite my opponent's Wolverine bouncing every which way and causing a ruckus. So here on turn 5, I'm just going to play Blob into the other Rickety Bridge. That will mean that if Wolverine flips from the center over to the right, the second Rickety Bridge will also activate, and that's just another opportunity to send Wolverine into Vibranium Mines and get it out of here, because Wolverine could potentially be a lot of power and could be a problematic card here. My opponent is just going to play some Vibranium into the mines. They could have potentially played that Vibranium into one of the Rickety Bridges, though. Might have been a little bit better for them, and then we're going to see this Wolverine bounce into the second Rickety Bridge, like I said, and then over into the mines. And now that Vibranium is really, really costing my opponent here, because now they can't play anything other than into Rickety Bridge. I think about making another Magneto play here, but ultimately I think we can just get more value out of dropping Skaar plus Vibranium and Power Stone, like I said, and moving Killmonger over wouldn't be super useful. I think the only way my opponent really gets out of this one, though, is if they have the means to change one of these locations, and they don't. So they're just going to play a Vibranium, and then they are going to lose a ton of cubes to me here, and that will make me victorious. So there we go. I thought that was just a really, really sweet one with Caiera in Rickety Bridge. This game kicks off with a really cool interaction. First off, Mind Stone into Gamma Lab is like kind of insane, because it draws me 2 1-cost cards to then turn into Hulks, and Space Stone even means that I can now move the Mind Stone over into Gamma Lab. So this is really good, and I have Shang-Chi in case my opponent also decides that they want to make a bunch of Hulks, but they decide not to. They're going to go for Zabu, so I'm going to have a huge Hulk advantage here. And on turn 3, I also draw Cull Obsidian, and I've got 4 energy thanks to Time Stone. So I can play Cull Obsidian and then move the Mind Stone over, and this is just a demonstration of the mechanics here. Wanted to show that if you move the Mind Stone, you cannot then play the Cull Obsidian. So just kind of a weird little minutia thing here. You have to play the Cull and then move the Mind Stone, but that's going to allow me to have a huge lead in 2 different locations to kick this game off. My opponent does have Mobius, so like I guess my wave isn't doing anything, but honestly I think we are in a totally fine spot regardless. What do I actually want to do here? I don't have a great play considering I haven't found Caiera, so I'm just gonna play Jeff and some random stones. It's nothing super impressive on this turn. Obviously Caiera would have been insane, but we'll just hope to draw that in the future. It's a little bit awkward that none of these stones draw a card. I'm just missing Reality Stone here. That's the only stone that I have not yet found, but I'm just going to drop the... I don't really think there's like too big of a rhyme or reason as far as where I drop these, and I'm just hoping my opponent does not Shang-Chi me this turn. That would be really awkward, but luckily it is going to be a Miss Marvel. And then I have Caiera, so I am definitely slamming that this turn. There is like some incentive to maybe like want to save it for the final turn of the game, but I just want to get it out on the field in case my opponent plays Shang-Chi this turn. And it actually makes a lot of sense if you think about it. If my opponent has Shang-Chi, they're actually really incentivized to play it this turn before Grand Central takes it out of their hand and then only destroys a Cull instead of blowing up 3 Hulks, which would be a lot more, because they could like still potentially find ways to battle against Cull Obsidian, but a second play into the Gamma Lab is going to mean that we are able to successfully Caiera my opponent's Shang-Chi, and then just for good measure, my opponent is going to Enchantress their own Zabu as a flop down a Vision into Grand Central. So that was a really, really good one, and from here, my opponent will just retreat. I talk a lot about there's a lot of like really tiny plays where you can gain an advantage, and I think that this is possibly the best example of that because it is a TVA game. Now I've got a really great curve here already, Mind Stone, Time Stone for a little bit of extra energy. The fact that I can draw Reality Stone means I can also control the TVA. Reality Stone's not supposed to work in the TVA in the lore. However, Reality Stone is a great answer to TVA because it means you're in control of the time of the game, and Time Stone also allowing you to control the time of the game. So I think this is a really good hand, but what is really funny about this game is I don't draw the Reality Stone, and then we get Collapsed Mine as location number 2. So we are potentially looking at a 3-turn game of Marvel Snap if both of us decide to skip a turn here. However, I'm not going to skip a turn. I don't think it's worth it, and I think I'm better off just playing Space Stone and having the ability to move 1 rock out of Collapsed Mine. I think that that is probably better, and my opponent actually kind of decides a similar thing. They are not going to skip turn 2. In a 4-turn game, it's just too big of a deal to skip a turn. However, I get to make the better deal of it here because I'll be able to move a rock into Tarnax, which isn't like a great location that I want to take that much advantage of regardless. And then I still have some really interesting decisions to make, which is why this is such a fun game despite only being 4 turns long. I kind of don't want to take priority because I've got Shang-Chi, and one of the ways that my opponent could potentially beat me is with Darkhawk. They are definitely a Darkhawk deck, showing me so far a Korg and a Ravonna. So I think I'm going to play the Collapsed Mine this turn. A little bit of a risk. If my opponent skips this turn, they will then easily be able to win in Collapsed Mine. However, I think it is a risk worth taking. And then from there, I just decide to play Jeff into TVA. It's a little bit more flexible, could move it into Tarnax to win next turn, and also potentially allows me to not take priority here, which was something I was actively looking for. So, with the Rock Slide for my opponent in TVA, I now do not have priority. I'm winning in a location that my opponent cannot battle for. And now I just have to potentially Shang-Chi my opponent, and they're not going to play their Darkhawk into Tarnax. So this is like a pretty obvious Shang-Chi. The awkward thing, though, with this Shang-Chi is I can't move Jeff into Tarnax. So if my opponent just played something small, even if they just played like Miss Marvel, I actually lose the game because my Shang-Chi would miss and then my opponent would have more power than me. So instead, what I decided to do is move over Jeff and just play Wave to battle for both side locations. My opponent retreats, so it doesn't really matter. But honestly, I thought this was just a really, really cool, basically 3-turn game with Collapsed Mine and TVA. Really was a 4-turn game, but just a lot going on in those 4 turns. Here's another wacky one, another fun one. My opponent is waving on turn 3. They've played Nebula and Echo so far, and I'm going to kick things off with a Lockjaw. However, now that I'm waved, I probably want to make use of this wave energy. As a reminder, you do not want to play Blob into Echo because Blob has an ongoing ability. Echo will just completely remove Blob's on reveal ability as well. So I'm just going to play Thanos into the Icebox on this turn. I think it's still a pretty decent use of my resources. And then my opponent plays Hobgoblin into Jotunheim. And this actually gets me a little bit nervous. Now I'm thinking, oh, maybe my opponent is playing a Galactus list. So I'm a little bit afraid of that. They're not going to play Galactus this turn though, so I don't really have to worry about it just yet. And for now, let's just play Mind Stone, get some more potential options, and then I'll also play Cull Obsidian, so that way I'm battling for Asteroid M. And there's like, Cull Obsidian is going to wind up in Asteroid M regardless, so no sense in stressing about that. And then I get basically a savior card here on the final turn of the game. Skaar actually will allow me to battle in Jotunheim against Galactus, which is just incredible to still be able to put enough points into Jotunheim. It will be a little bit awkward though, because I can just barely get to enough points in Jotunheim, and then I could either like use Reality Stone to change the location, though that actually won't beat Galactus. So instead of doing that, I've got to move Jeff over. This will beat Galactus, and then lose to Galactus. Very, very silly. I hope you're following me here, but the plan is to stop Galactus from activating, then lose to Galactus center, and beat my opponent on those two side locations. So a very, very weird game here, but very fun because of that. However, my opponent does not actually play their Galactus here. I don't know what they are, if they're actually playing Galactus in their deck or not. But they're just going to play some other cards, so we are going to cycle some things into this Lockjaw. We'll grab a Soul Stone, and then we'll just play the Time Stone. My opponent Shang-Chi's my Cull, which is unfortunate, but that means they only have 2 energy left over for center. It's going to be Jeff, and I'm able to grab the win by just 1 power. That was a really, really cool game, but not my favorite game. And neither is this. My favorite game is coming. That's going to be up next. I want to look at one more game first. I played a ton of fun games today. Like I said, this one kicks off with Project Pegasus, and we've got Reality Stone, Devil Dinosaur, as well as Cull Obsidian, which will allow me to play a really cheap Skaar later on. However, the turn 2 location kind of complicates things. We see Gamma Lab again, and this time I want to use Space Throne to save one of my cards from turning into a Hulk. It probably would have been fine if Devil Dinosaur had turned into a Hulk. Just felt it felt like it would have been overkill. I didn't need that many Hulks, and it's not like a huge upside to turn Devil Dinosaur into a Hulk. So instead, I'm going to try to get Devil Dinosaur out of there, and partially this is because of Shang-Chi, right? Shang-Chi can just win in the Gamma Lab. Now, if my opponent is playing the bounce deck, this is potentially the list that I just showcased yesterday, which is a deck that also runs Shang-Chi. So that's another reason to not want to go like super crazy in the Gamma Lab, and they are actually going to wind up going pretty Gamma Lab wild. They are going to play Nico on turn 3, and that'll move over their Werewolf as well, which will give them 3 Hulks. Werewolf, I don't know, turning Werewolf into a Hulk, it's a little bit questionable. But I think my opponent is in a reasonable spot here regardless for a number of reasons. But we also have a pretty good curve. So I like running out Caiera as soon as possible. And I actually snap, but I don't think Caiera is actually the play, just because next turn I could play Caiera plus Skaar, which I think is just going to be a cleaner curve. So I'm just going to Shang-Chi this turn, and next turn I will Caiera plus Skaar, and I think that that's super sweet. One thing I have not yet done with this deck is play Skaar for free. Unfortunately, it's not going to happen in this game either, as my opponent's Enchantress shuts off my Devil Dinosaur. That's definitely potentially could have been an incentive to make more Hulks though. So that way I could actually play Skaar for free. But unfortunately, that is not going to happen this game. And then on turn 5, I think about just playing Caiera and preventing my opponent from killing my Hulk. However, with the fact that they have 5 energy this turn, I think it's more likely that my opponent is going to go for Annihilus. And if I want to make use of this Cull Obsidian, I think now is the time to do it. This blocks my opponent's Annihilus from giving me the Hood and bunking me in Xandar. And then next turn I'll still be able to play Skaar plus Caiera, which is a pretty good final turn of the game still. So I think that that is still a pretty fantastic position to be in, and we do correctly predict the Annihilus, and with that my opponent will retreat. But now this is it. This is a great game, and this is the game that gets me into the top 400 as well, which just makes it a lot of fun. And we are kicking things off with a really powerful hand. Lemuria is going to put a little bit of a dent in these plans, but we still get to lead off with Mind Stone, so I'm still feeling pretty dang good here. And then turn 2, we get Onslaught Citadel, which is a pretty good location for us potentially with Devil Dinosaur already in hand, and the fact that I draw Lockjaw here means that I'm snapping. This will give me 4 energy next turn off the Time Stone, and I'll be able to play Lockjaw plus Stone into either Onslaught Citadel or one of these other locations. Interestingly here, my opponent starts emoting on Onslaught Citadel. And then they play an Iceman. That hits my Reality Stone, not a huge deal there. And I'm probably just going to play Lockjaw plus Soulstone. And with the fact that X Mansion pops up as that third location, I think I'm just going to go for the center because I don't really want to get one of my Lockjaw spaces taken up by the random pool from X Mansion. So I'm just going to play center. My opponent was emoting on Onslaught Citadel a lot, and then I think they realized, hey, this guy's got Reality Stone in their deck. Maybe I don't want to telegraph my plays too much, so they also emote on those other locations as well. But the fact that I have now played Lockjaw onto Onslaught Citadel means that I'm not really planning on making use of Devil Dinosaur in this scenario. And then we get kind of an awkward roll out of X Mansion. We get Professor X, and we are losing in the X Mansion now. It's thematic to get Professor X in his own mansion, but it's a little bit awkward, and my opponent with Ironheart is showing that they might have potential ways to get more power over into X Mansion. Plus I'm thinking like Claw, just played against that a little bit earlier. That could put some more power into a Professor X location. But my opponent is actually doing Wong things, and that means we could potentially expect an Odin onto Wong to trigger Ironheart again, and that would be able to give my opponent a bunch more power still in X Mansion. So there's a lot of different ways that this could go, and I decide I'm really cramped for space here because of this Professor X. I only get to make one play this turn and one play next turn. And I think it's worth it for my one play to turn off Onslaught Citadel. And that way I don't have to deal with whatever crazy shenanigans my opponent has coming out. I'm gonna have to play a card most likely into Lockjaw regardless, and I need to win in the center and in Lemuria. Soulstone, probably not going to do it, especially against my opponent's wonged up Black Panther for 15 power. So now my opponent is definitely playing center. They'll be able to Odin that Black Panther and send it to the moon. Some crazy stuff happened though in that last turn. I drew Jeff. I also have 9 energy. Did you catch that? White hot room. Plus I was the first to fill that location. So I can actually play 2 cards on this final turn. I can use Jeff to battle for X Mansion, and then I can play Magneto. We started this video with Magneto, and we are back there. Magneto to move Wong and Ironheart out of White Hot Room into Lemuria means that my opponent's Odin is just going to win them in already one location and not going to allow them to trigger Ironheart to pump up their Yellow Jacket. Because if I did not move Ironheart, my opponent would have won this game, pumping up Yellow Jacket again. But we get Ironheart out of there. They do pump up their Black Panther, so they are going to take that center location. But Lucky Jeff plus a lucky White Hot Room is enough to make this game go in my favor. Definitely got lucky on that one. But hey, I was able to take it for 8 cubes. It was a very, very silly game, and I think my opponent was probably not too upset about it despite those emotes. I think they were just having fun, and that puts me into the top 400 players on the global leaderboard. That's going to be it for me today. Thank you guys very much for watching. I'm NoLucksGiven. Peace.